Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? Don't let anybody make you think that God chose America as his divine messianic force to be a sort of policeman of the whole world. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, you are too arrogant. If you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power, and I'll place it in the hands of a nation that doesn't even know my name. Be still and know that I'm God.
Welcome again to Street Talk. My name is Ahmad Shakaraki, and on Street Talk, what we do, we cover things from Michigan, the U.S., and abroad. And what we do on Street Talk is that we try to give the people some information. A lot of information being hid and thrown away and all these other kind of things, but what we try to do is give people some of the information that's out there. Now, joining me tonight is one of my good friends, Mr. Dennis Burnside.
What's up, bro?
Hey, all right. This thing about that's going on in Flint. The governor wants to say that he just got the word. And now, we know people working in Flint has been bringing that water, some of them for over a year. There's one guy was telling me his mother been getting water, bottled water for over 2 years, but this governor didn't know anything about it.
Well, one of the things I always like to do when I break down events, the Kennedy assassination, MLK's assassination, 9/11, is I like to create my own timeline of when things were first printed in the mainstream media. And that gives you context for the claims they make later. And it also helps you when you can add in new information where you can see where they were prevaricating or outright lying. I came up with this timeline earlier today, and I don't like to read on the air or on the radio, but I think in this case it might help the people get context. So let's start with in 2011.
Okay.
Flint's first emergency manager was installed. 2011 was the time when Flint was told you don't have a democracy anymore.
Okay.
Your city council and your mayor are obviated. They have no more power.
Right.
They're ceremonial. They're there to collect a check if we let them. They can't pass any meaningful laws. The only thing that they can do is pay the bond on time. Outside of that, any law that they pass is meaningless unless the emergency manager concurs. So it's a dictatorship. Let's establish that right up front. This is in 2011. In March 2015, the third emergency manager was installed, and that's Snyder's Uncle Tom, Uncle Ruckus, Darnell Early. Now, one of the first things he did was he reviewed a city council recommendation that they switch water from the Detroit Basin, which is fresh water coming from Lake Huron, and go to one that's up in the Saginaw Valley, those cities around Flint moving eastward. Now, the recommendation from city council was that only a recommendation because they had no power to make any decision. So let's establish that right up front. Everything made subsequently was made by an emergency manager. Darnell Early agreed with that decision, and then we see from there what we have. Immediately after this water was switched, and over local objections to the Flint River. Because it was known to be heavily polluted for decades.
You're right.
You immediately saw problems with people talking about itching and rashes and problems with odor and taste with the water. This is in March 2014. You even had people saying that they were concerned about bacteria.
Right.
Again, this decision was made by the emergency manager, not by the people of Flint. In August of 2014, city officials advised people to boil their water because there was chloroform bacteria found in the water. In October 2014, Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, which reports directly to Snyder, one of two entities that go directly to Snyder, the emergency manager and the MDEQ, said at that time, well, we just advise you to boil water, everything will be fine after that. This is attributable to cold weather and aging pipeline and a decline in the population, as if that has something to do with it. That same month, General Motors informed the Snyder administration that they weren't going to be using that water source anymore because it was corroding their engine parts, and they switched to the Detroit water system again. You had Detroit come back to Flint and say, we will reconnect you to our water system and we will waive the $4 million connection fee. Flint's emergency manager at that time, which was Jerry Ambrose, this is 2 months before Early came in, declined the offer. He didn't even review as to why he did it. From that point on, it's just a litany of complaints and evidence that the Snyder administration ignored. For example, you had a woman by the name of Leanne Walters who had her water tested privately. It came back with a test of 104 parts per billion of lead. 15 parts per billion is what the EPA says requires action, and they also say that there's no level of lead that is safe. She has 104 parts per billion. A water expert from the EPA then discussed the high levels of lead in the Flint water in February 2015. So now we have almost a year go by, and they're aware of this problem, and they still haven't done anything about it. They hired a company called Veolia, a consulting group hired by the emergency manager who reports that the city's water meets the state and federal standards, and it didn't even comment on the lead agreement, on the lead levels rather. So continually we saw these high levels of lead, and I'm not going to read any more down this timeline because from that point forward, it was a matter of information and evidence coming out, and the Snyder administration either ignoring it or low playing it, saying it's not a concern, it's not anything that you should be worried about. Just continue to drink this water. It's safe. We say it's safe, despite all the evidence. Until such time as we had a pediatrician come in from Hurley Hospital who reported an epidemic of high lead levels in the blood of children, and then you started to see the Snyder administration move at the tortoise-like pace. They're still moving at. They haven't made one move to remove any of the pipelines. They haven't changed any of their protocols. You are still getting water from the Flint River with pipes that are not corrosion control treated going into these households. Well, I take that back. Recently they did switch back to the Detroit water source, but the problem is no longer contained by the water source because the pipes have been corroded. Whatever you run through there is going to release the heavy metals, including lead. Just recently they had a report of Legionnaire's disease bacteria reported at McLaren Hospital, inside of one of the hospitals. So think of the economic ramifications for apartments, building owners, restaurant owners, coffee shop owners, hospitals. Any private business there has to be in a state of devastation because of the economic disadvantage. And then the most important thing, and I say that only because that's all Republicans care about. They only care about revenue and profits and bottom line. And that's being devastated by this move. And then you go, of course, to the people of Flint, and you see an entire generation that has been poisoned and has a very tenuous future, because we know that they're going to be susceptible to emotional outbursts. We know that they're going to have a hard time coping. We know that their IQ is going to be diminished. We know that this is going to have a detrimental effect on them for the rest of their lives. And we're looking at this saying, well, what are we going to do next, Governor Snyder? And he seems to be standing around twiddling his thumbs, looking for scapegoats to fire.
Right. And the thing is that he, right now, he's trying to blame everybody but himself, you know.
Absolutely.
Well, I just found out. Well, I didn't know. I mean, it's like you didn't know. The boss didn't know what was going on.
Well, when you consider again that under Snyder, he had an emergency manager. He had a deputy emergency manager. He had the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, and he had a representative of the EPA, all reporting to him directly from the moment this story first was broached. Maybe not publicly, but behind the scenes when some of these people from Flint were complaining, and some of these private water tests were coming back, and some of the evidence that there was an issue here, like when General Motors switched their water away, and Governor Snyder helped them accommodate that move. They knew there was a problem, which means Snyder knew specifically. And now we just found out a few days ago that there were emails sent directly to Snyder addressing him of these problems with the bacteria in the water, with the lead in the water. He knew.
Well,
and even if he did know, Ahmad, even if he didn't know, that's almost worse, because then that shows negligence. That shows that he just didn't care. But I just don't buy that he didn't know.
I don't either. You know, the thing is that, you know, we see all of these, you know, we see some people coming up. The guy who owned the Pistons owned something down in Detroit. He's given $8 million, but the thing that makes me angry is that he's got him and his cronies got all this money saved, and now people from other places got to give money, and then the government gonna have to give money.
You're talking about Snyder's $500 million rainy day fund?
Yeah.
Well, the problem with right-wing government, which establishes an oligarchy, which is a nice way of saying it's a fascist government, is that they always emphasize the private sector over the public. Now, when you have a traditional democratic government, you have the public commons held in abeyance for the public good. Parks, water, bridges, highways, schools. We all contribute our tax dollars so that we have this available to us that we could not afford individually. Now the shift has been made that everything is so privatized. I'm supposed to clap my hands every time somebody like the owner of the Pistons or some organization out in California, whoever, privately funds some water bottles being sent into Flint. Let's stop that, because that's not the way government is supposed to be run. Government's supposed to be run in a way that it affects everyone,
and
in
it helps
a way,
everyone.
Exactly, in a way that everyone benefits. It shouldn't matter how much money you have. So don't give me the largesse, the welfare, the handout of Tom Monahan, not Tom Monahan, but the Pistons' current owner, or whoever it is, or whatever musical group. I mean, there's all kind of people who are contributing, and God bless them. I know their heart's in the right place, but it shouldn't be necessary. The people of Flint, the people of that entire water basin paid their taxes, and they should have clean, safe water provided to them by their tax dollars, not by handouts. I don't want to acquiesce to this standard where we have to hope that some rich oligarch, some billionaire, sprinkles down his largesse on us so that we can have decent schools, or we can have a decent park, or the bridge doesn't crumble. No, pay your damn taxes like everybody else. Maybe instead of being a billionaire, you'll be a 700 millionaire, and pay your taxes, and we won't have to ask you for a handout. keep your water bottle, pay your taxes, and let's have clean water. The next thing we need to do is get rid of this emergency manager law once and for all.
Yeah.
And I know we're going to talk about the Supreme Court, and this directly connects to that, because you can't allow people to have their democratic rights taken away.
Right.
That small d Democrat, where you have the right to vote and represent yourself. When you take it away and you bring in dictators and oligarchs, this is what happens. People get poisoned.
Yeah.
Schools fall apart. The city of Detroit had the same Uncle Tom Early in there acting as their emergency educational manager.
Yeah.
What do you have? You have roofs caving in on schools.
Yep.
You have heatless classrooms.
Yep.
You have rodents run around the size of dogs. You have mold and mushrooms growing in the hallway.
Yep.
Teachers are not adequate books. They think that's just fine
Oh, yeah.
because it's cheap and we don't have to spend any more money on it.
Yep.
That is not a democratic government, and they wouldn't do that in Rochester.
Oh, no.
They wouldn't do that in Birmingham. They wouldn't do that in Grosse Pointe. So why you want to do that in Detroit? Why do you want to do that in Flint, Benton Harbor? Because those populations are black.
Right.
They don't give a damn about you, and that's what it's showing you
Right.
how they feel about you.
Black and poor, you know, and,
Yeah.
and other poor minorities. I mean, poor people living in these areas.
But the organizing principle is predominantly black.
Right.
For example, you've got Grosse Ile, you've got Taylor, you've got all these downriver communities struggling economically because the state under the Republicans
That's right.
reneged on their revenue sharing agreement,
Yeah.
which is what Detroit and Flint and these other cities budgeted for, which would balance their books.
Right.
They held that payment back and they say, look, you're a wreck.
Yeah.
You're in a situation where you need an emergency manager.
Right.
You can't afford democracy because you got so much debt. Well, the debt was created by the people in power by holding back that revenue sharing money and giving a $40 billion tax break to the wealthy and the corporations. So those small downriver towns are affected the same way.
Oh, yeah.
They're in economic turmoil
Yeah.
too, but you won't see them acquiesce to having their mayor and their city council and the school board
No.
taken away,
Oh, no.
and they won't be asked to have that happen because they're Caucasian.
Yeah.
Now Flint is predominantly black. There's a lot of poor white folks there, and they're being affected by this. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
And they don't have any love for any poor people. Period.
No.
But where it is predominantly black is where
yeah.
you see them target their efforts.
Well, you look at the places where they got these emergency managers, you know.
It's always in a predominantly
yeah.
black city.
You know.
Yeah.
Well, y'all can't do, y'all can't get it right, so we're gonna put them up.
Yeah.
I mean, you know. Of all.
Now, all through Reconstruction and Jim Crow and the Civil Rights Movement, and through times of prosperity and depression, they were able to govern themselves. From a position of power or from a position of being a minority.
Yeah.
They still were able to exercise their franchise as members of a democratic society until such time as Snyder comes along.
yeah.
And he says, you can't afford it.
Right.
You can't afford democracy.
And, you know, and you know, it's the first time anybody I've heard, anybody has heard of this emergency manager.
Oh, I think it was written by ALEC, the American Legislative
Oh,
Reform Group that takes these guys out, plies them with liquor and food and hookers, gets them drunk, and on the way out of the door, they have them sign in some new legislation that they present on the floor as their own, and then it's passed in law. I'm certain that ALEC wrote this emergency manager law, and Snyder was a template for a nationwide push, but Snyder messed it up.
Right.
He's ruined it for them all temporarily until such time as we elect a true Democratic leader, not one of these corporate Democratic leaders who can come in and say enough of this crap. You guys have stolen and ripped off the commons, and you've ripped off the people long enough.
Right, because you know, I remember 2 years ago, about 2 years ago now, when you had 3 more states, Alabama, Georgia, and it was either Mississippi or Tennessee. But anyway, they was we're gonna wait and see what happens here.
Of course.
You know.
Michigan was the template.
Yeah.
Wisconsin and Ohio were watching it closely
Yeah,
because you had the same type of right-wing crazed men
Yeah.
like Walker
Yeah.
in Wisconsin, and they were looking at Michigan
Yeah.
saying, wow, look what they did.
Yeah.
They actually took these Negroes' vote.
That's it.
I mean, they made Jim Crow look like a walk in the park.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, let's see how this all plays
Yeah.
out, and then we're going to do it too.
Right.
Well, he outkicked his coverage on this one
Yeah.
with this water crisis, and now he's retreating rapidly. He's firing his underlings as fast as they can come. He's talking about reverting these cities back to their own representative government as
Yeah.
if he's doing us a favor.
Yeah.
And this all emanates ultimately from what we've had in the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court under Scalia has been a travesty,
man.
has been an absolute travesty. Here's a man who wrote the majority opinion in 2000, Bush v. Gore.
Oh, yeah.
And it was such an unorthodox, unjustified, egregious opinion that they wrote into the opinion that this has no precedent. In other words, there's nothing that we're looking
Right.
back on to establish this.
Yep.
And this also will not stand as precedent for
Right,
anything
right.
going forward. This is a one-person issue.
Yeah.
George Bush is the
Yeah.
one person that we're advocating for.
Yeah.
And they actually had the nerve to say that if we don't step into this vote count, that George Bush's democratic, constitutionally protected rights will be obviated. Well, what about the people of Florida who voted?
Yeah.
And because of this clown show led by Scalia, and you can go on down opinion after opinion, he once wrote that the Constitution has nothing in it that
Yeah.
protects an innocent man
Yep.
from execution by the state.
Yeah.
He wrote that, and then he laughs about it.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you got his little parrot Uncle Tom boy, Clarence Thomas, sitting there who's too mute to speak.
Yeah.
But he just votes along with
Oh,
Scalia.
yeah.
And I don't know what he's going to do now. So the day Scalia died, I wrote to some friends of mine, ought to be a holiday in the black community in the United States.
Yeah.
He's been that bad.
Yeah.
So you look at what happened in Michigan under the emergency manager law, and you can point directly to Washington,
Oh, yeah.
D.C.
Yeah.
and the U.S. Supreme Court, led by Scalia and Roberts and all the Thomas, all these
Yeah.
corporate
Yeah.
right-wing, completely off the reservation
Yeah.
so-called justices,
Yeah.
and this is the outcome that you get.
Yeah.
So we right now we have an opportunity to get that fifth liberal or at least rational
Yeah.
justice in place now under the president, who's still president till January 20,
Right, yeah,
2017,
But-
and that's our hope.
But you know, now we look back. There was 3 or 4 presidents in the last year of their term named a Supreme Court member.
That objection by the right wing that began Saturday night
Yeah.
is just political maneuvering.
That's all it
They
is.
know that they've got the corporate media in their pocket
Oh, yeah.
because the corporate media is owned by Monsanto. The corporate media is owned by Apple, the General Motors, the big multinational corporations, far right wing who want this fascism
Yeah.
in place, and they'll be the echo chamber for what these fools want. So when they say, "Oh, we can't vote,"
Yeah.
we have an election coming
Yeah,
up. Well,
yeah.
it didn't preclude us in the past.
No.
It has nothing to do with it.
No.
The president's constitutional duty is to appoint
Yes.
for
Yeah.
for approval a candidate, and if that person is approved by a majority of the Senate and the House, he or she becomes the next justice on the Supreme Court. There's no chronological limitation relative to the next election.
Now I heard the other day we got about 7 minutes. I heard that we ain't gonna even have not gonna even have a nothing about it.
Oh,
you know?
they won't. What they're
You
trying
know.
to do is run out the clock.
Yeah,
Ahmad.
yeah, they're trying to-
They want President Eduardo Rafael Cruz. I'm not going to call him Ted. His name is Eduardo Rafael Cruz because they always reminded us that the president's name is Hussein
Yeah, yeah.
Obama. So let's call Rafael Cruz by his real
Yeah,
name.
yeah.
Okay. They want Rafael Cruz, or they want the biggest nut on the scene in history. I think Donald Trump,
Yeah.
who's completely
Yeah.
unqualified.
Oh, yeah.
by just by pure IQ.
Yeah.
They want one of them to become president
yeah.
so that they can appoint
Oh, yeah.
a far right winger that makes Scalia look moderate, and then move on with business as usual.
Yeah.
And so what you're going to see is, and I hope Obama doesn't go with a moderate vote to try to placate them, because there is no placating.
No.
Get you a show enough good liberal.
Yeah.
And I don't care if it's black, white, red, or yellow. I don't care. Male, female, get you a qualified liberal justice appointee and have them sent to the Senate, because what you're going to do is they're going to filibuster. They're going to refuse to hold meetings. They're going to refuse to hold votes. This is going to go on.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure the next president-elect will be the one who appoints the one who ultimately becomes the next the ninth justice of this Supreme Court, which is all the more reason why the Democrats must win this election. And I think hopefully this energizes and motivates the Democratic base, irrespective of whether it's Clinton or Sanders, who represents a party, to get that vote out, because we just can't afford to have Cruz or Trump select the next Supreme Court justice. Can't do it.
And the thing is that I heard each one of them yesterday talking about what the Republican would do, and if they have the opportunity to select.
And they probably lied.
Yesterday, either yesterday or the day before, Cruz, he's talking about, Obama ain't gonna, he gonna appoint a liberal. It's like, so he don't have a right to appoint who he wants to, but all the rest of the Republican presidents has had a right to appoint.
Well, let's look at it this way. We know from polls that 90% of what people want from their government, they don't get.
Right.
The 1% get almost everything they want. So you don't have a representative government. So you've had this word liberal thrown around so much now, it's almost a pejorative.
Right.
It's almost like calling somebody the N-word.
Right, yeah.
You know, they're going to liberal. Yeah, you're damn right we want a liberal.
Yeah.
So where we are with this now is that you have so many people who are disgusted with the way government is run now under this oligarchy, that you have people who would never in their life allow you to call them a liberal, but if you ask them what they want from the government.
Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? Don't let anybody make you think that God chose America as his divine messianic force to be a sort of policeman of the whole world. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, you are too arrogant. If you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power, and I'll place it in the hands of a nation that doesn't even know my name. Be still and know that I'm God.